disposition here at the beginning of September of '63. Got about a year before I have to start worrying about the election. And things don't look good right now. You need around 50 points, I think, for the election. And if you look, the Union right now is at 37. Confederacy's only at 6. Now, those might be a little off. Okay, 31 points. That sounds great, except I got this CP table total in there, and that's 21 more points. So there's a lot to be done to make that election work. A lot of work the Union's got to make in this year, and I don't think it's going to happen. But we'll see if we can see it happen. This alert stays because the queue are too close. Point-wise, the Confederates, this is one of the things. The Confederates have had a couple of times, and this is another one where they got kind of mediocre better, where they're rolling just better on the CP table. Sometimes, some of these are very, very different. So, like, you know, some of these 6-4, yeah, they get kind of low on the tertiaries, but when you're facing Burnsides with his 3, he's not going to be able to do a whole lot against you. So we're going to see these depots burning too, because they're the route into the Confederacy, unless the Union gets the jump on them, but they can only take one anyway. Anyway, it's definitely been the case that the Confederates have been getting a few more points than the Union has, I think, over the course of the game, and that can be a major factor in this. Supply raiders didn't do so much, the commerce raiders. This is where I think big things could happen. Because you see, the Confederates are kind of low on strength. The Northern Virginia Army's down to 10. Army of Tennessee's at 15, which isn't too bad, given that it's facing the Cumberland, which is only at 8. But the Potomac's up around at 23. It's pretty potent. And the Confederates have troops spread out throughout Virginia, which they can maybe collect up, but right now they're just not in a position to go head-to-head with Sherman there. All right. And we kick things off in the autumn of '63 with a big 7-point swing. The Union opens up with Sherman attacking Johnston. Now, both armies were demoralized. We see they got back up. Both also took 3-point losses. That's a good result for the Union. They would have liked to cause more losses than they take. They had the advantages slightly. They had 2-1. But both sides had a lot of pluses, and there were re-rolls. Sherman didn't manage to get the better of Johnston there. Also, Lyon went running off towards New Orleans. Now, he's crossed the border. The militia came in. I remembered them a little late, but I remembered them. I also brought some reinforcements in and a leader. Turns out to be Price. And Lee is chasing forward. I would really like to not see New Orleans fall as the Confederates. The Confederates would have liked to have run Jackson around to try to get him into that Johnson army, get Johnson relieved of command. But there's no safe way to slip by this hex with Sherman there, and Sherman's got Cav. He's got Sheridan with him. You can see some casualties. S.D. Lee got hit. These are... Schofield got hit, but he doesn't matter. And much worse, Cleburne. You can't really see unless I put my body in the way. Cleburne is dead now. That takes a lot of points out of the Confederate side for battles over here. And things are looking really weak for them. It looks like the East is going to be where the big breakthrough happens, especially since all the points are committed over there. Lyon managed an ill-fated attack on New Orleans. Both took a D2, but man, he got kind of lucky there. It started out as a +4, but there's 4 shifts against, 2 for the fortress, 2 for the terrain. That puts him on a pretty questionable table, the -3, -4. He had a +2 advantage because Price was the leader there as opposed to himself, as opposed to anybody, you know, who could maybe do much. And he also had a larger force, which allows you to do more damage sometimes. But that did not work out well. Everything else is kind of in stasis once again. Lee had the opportunity to move a couple of times, but I kind of want to recover New Orleans. At this point, the Confederates' most important thing is maintaining strength points. New Orleans is pretty damn tough for the Union to take. What I should have done probably is done a combined operation and sent the Porter's force down there. I thought I had a shot at taking New Orleans. I didn't think it would be that heavily built up. Next time I have to launch a bigger attack against it, there's no question. Because that cost me troops that I can't really afford to lose in this theater. Lee's got about parity with me. Nothing's moving over here either, though. The Union's out of command points, essentially, in both the West and the East at this time. Confederates have kept a lot of command points, though. It's often hard to pick up the narrative when I'm in the middle of this, but because, you know, I was gone for the day doing my work. Anyway, because there aren't fixed turn limitations here, I break in the midst of a turn always. The Union started their operations in the Trans-Mississippi, Burnside's moving down with recent points. And then over here I was going to rally these guys, but I don't have a line of communications back. I got Lyon sitting there, so I had to move Lee for the Confederates towards there. He really has to try to relieve New Orleans, or else it's going to just disintegrate. And then over here, I'm starting to scoot Jackson around. He's going to come back and join Johnston's army. I don't want to take any risks that Sherman will almost certainly be able to stomp on him if he walks too close. Things look like they were just about to wind down, and we got another CP table, bunch of new command points out there. 2-point action followed that. Lyon was able to rally himself. That makes him less of an interesting target for Lee. He's sitting in a swamp. That's kind of dangerous. On the other hand, there is a risk of him hitting New Orleans, but I thought it was more important to swing Jackson around and get him joined in. Now, I might be removing Johnston from command and shipping him over to join Lee's army. When you remove someone from command, you have like 3 different options. You can either fire him, demote him. Johnston doesn't have that option. Or just remove him from the army and he gets a free move somewhere, which is what I'd want to do in this case because Johnston's a good commander. Lee managed to looks like save the New Orleans garrison, knocking Lyon down. And now Lyon was out of supply, and over here he had to spend his really last resources on a command to move down here where he can get sea supply so that his army at least undemoralizes. But Lee actually has enough commands with his discretionary points. They were a little ahead before the reroll, or before the reboot of points, and he's in much better shape. They can kind of afford to get the Union Army of the Cumberland. It's stuck down here in Louisiana swamps, which is not a place you want to be at all. And not with an army. A little bit of far western stuff, but that's about it. Union got a 1-point advantage, brought a reinforcement in, and then they went over to try to attack Camp Hudson here. And you can see they got unlucky for the first time. The Texas Rangers hit them. Now that's very simple. You just roll, and whoever gets the highest roll wins. The other guy's dead. The Union wins this one, so the Texas Ranger is thrown to the chart. And now I can continue with the raid. Another big span of points, and Lee pushes the Army of the Cumberland deeper and deeper down into the bayou. That's just about hopeless there, isn't it? Also relieved Johnston of command and moved him over to Nashville. Sherman took that advantage, though, for the Union side to smack Jackson. And, well, they've got enough command points to recover him, but that means Sherman's 4-star counters in the game. That's important, and it gives him a notable advantage over Jackson, actually, in that as long as Sherman shows up somewhere, he takes command now. And that's, you know, I had to relieve someone of command to give Sherman command, just like I had to do with Jackson there. And there's always the danger that new leaders will show up over here, injured ones, who end up, you know, spoiling your command ratings or whatever. I also had Curtis do a naval operation here with Porter. Porter got wounded. Took St. Augustine. It doesn't look like I'm going to get to keep troops there, though. I lost one. The militia showed up there. I lost one, and now I have to work my way. Actually, no, yeah, St. Augustine. That cuts Jacksonville off, the imports. I was planning on kind of, trying to operate in this Georgia-Florida region. There aren't a lot of points there, but it's an area not in the east, and I've got a lot to do in the east. I was kind of hoping to move Ord here, but the truth of the matter is there's not much I can do in the west with only one army trapped down in Louisiana. Quick look at the CP table. As you can see, we're getting down to the bottom again. That's just naval points for the Union, which they don't have a lot of good use for because they lost their naval leader. Now they could use one of the army leaders here to command a naval invasion. That's a little rougher than doing it with a naval leader, though. They have to count the boats into their command rating. Union got the jump, and Sherman was able to defeat Jackson quite handily, inflicting 3 losses with none to himself. And Jackson couldn't even retreat to Richmond because then Bragg would take command. I think it's Bragg there. Maybe it's Beauregard. This is the problem of having... yeah, it's Bragg. Bragg would take command, and I wouldn't have had the points to rally the army. Now, if Jackson reacts into Richmond, that's just as bad in a sense because Bragg will take command over him there. I've got to get Bragg out of there, but I don't have the extra point right now to do that. And that's the problem with the Jackson leader. He's not Lee. He doesn't outrank everyone else. All right. Confederates, well, I pulled these civilized Indians who were kind of illegally in Missouri anyway out using some points that I would have burned otherwise. I can't do anything about this. Nothing's happening for either side here. The points have all been spent down there. All right. And that was the end there. Nothing much happened, just some points to burn. I've got to get rid of... Forgot about this. That rallies. Probably have some of these alert markers to remove. I'll try to get another turn in on here. This time the point spread ended up favoring the Union, not the Confederates. They got one clear point advantage over in the east, plus they have their extra reinforcements, but more importantly, they got a bunch of leaders that they're getting promotions for. The Confederates have very few left. You can see how many Confederate leaders have died here, and that's pretty common. The Union, many fewer. The reason is there's a lot of lower ranked Confederate leaders or Confederate leaders who never get to that 3-star level. Their counters won't allow it, so that they're constantly capable of being killed. Whereas many of the Union leaders have the ability to rise up to 3 stars. And once you get there, you're pretty much invulnerable. We did lose McPherson recently, but he was at 2 stars when he went under. I don't think we have any 3 stars gone at all, except for Johnston we removed, and the generals that we actually removed from the battle. We hit the 30% mark on the blockade. Now, usually this is a point where the levels go into the painful region. You've got the Mississippi cut, and even the other side of the Confederacy is in pretty bad shape. This is reflected in the game outside of the blockade as well, though. You can see there's no Confederate reinforcements. This is part of why they're falling back. Of course, there is a manpower difference too. The Union had tremendous resources and manpower compared to the Confederacy, but some of it is equipment, guns. The Confederates were running out of the tools of war as well as the manpower, and that's not really reflected in the game. A Confederacy that's solid like this, that's barely suffering, that's above the 100 level, probably should have more troops. So the game kind of takes a natural progression that if you don't follow the historical model, as we're obviously not here with the Union not really getting any real grip on the Confederacy, may seem a little less than realistic, to tell you the truth. All right. Decent points going through. We're up to 65 U.S. ships sunk. Those are only a couple of victory points, but that may, if this was a close game, that may be enough to make the difference. Things get off to an ugly start for the Confederates. Sherman runs around and starts off from the peninsula again. That's any better terrain to attack Richmond from. Johnston's able to intercept in there, but that puts Braxton Bragg in charge, and it was only a 2-point advantage, so the Confederates can't recover from the demoralization they took. Sherman did not take one. He was successful there. And it looks like Richmond's going to fall very shortly. Quite early, actually, and it's a valuable territory, valuable city. And so the Confederates had 2 points to spend. They used it to push Lyon down a little further into Fort Jackson. This becomes kind of a problem for the Confederates now. Now, the Union can't get out of there, except if they sea lift out, of course. And that may be the best move. Just try to reshift that Union army out of there. Doesn't sound like a bad idea at all. Wonder why I didn't think of it earlier. That would leave Lee stranded back here. So that's actually quite appealing. Let me make sure I can do it, that I don't need a port. I may need a port. But yeah, for the Confederates, now they're facing a fortress. Of course, there's almost nothing left to the Army of the Cumberland. It's down to 3 strength points here. Looks like evacuation's not an option. You're only able to do it from the northeastern coastal states. In fact, you couldn't even evacuate from Virginia using that type of sea movement. In addition, I'd need a naval leader, which I don't have to move an army. What I do have, oddly enough, in this battle over here, is somehow Admiral Porter ended up in that stack. He was the reinforcement. I was hoping for somebody who'd help the battle. I ended up with some naval attaché along in the situation, which is less than optimal, but, well, I have to spend a command to get him somewhere. Gotta be careful here. I think I screwed up last turn. This is not the Western Theater anymore. They're across the Mississippi. That's Trans-Mississippi. I replenished the points. Union got a big 4-point span. I haven't done the Confederates yet, but there goes Richmond. And whole big command stack, Bragg, yeah, great, Jackson, etc., is all in the pool. There's basically nothing facing the Army of the Potomac. There's sort of a free march for Sherman to make his way across. And this is how you get points, is that you capture all the territories within a state and you convert the state over. It's neutral. It's no longer supporting the opponent, and you get double the points that way, basically. So that's what I've got to start working towards. Also allows you to walk through them. The Confederate fortress, I got to put that aside. They can't rebuild that. I'll put it over here. Army of Northern Virginia is also gone. That can't be rebuilt either. Whew. Big swing of points. I don't remember what it was, like 8. Taps out the Confederate. They have nothing left to do. For the Union, Sherman's marching down on Norfolk. He's taken Petersburg already. The Confederates pulled back to Raleigh, did some rail movement. I usually forget about rail movement, but it's tremendously valuable at this kind of point in the game, where you want to move all your few little strength points that you have into key places. Of course, it's still important to keep some of the coastal areas protected, because otherwise the Union can just land here and start up a new force and capture all of one of these states. One of the problems. We got Union troops marching down here under Schofield. And we got a Confederate army formed under Johnston here, the Army of Mississippi. Yeah, I don't know what it really is. I think it's the Army of Kentucky, something glorious like that. Obviously, the Confederates are doing so much better in the West than they did historically, but the breakthrough in the East, that could be huge. The war can be won in the East, and maybe that concentration in the West, maybe even with all the advantages it looked like the Confederates had, who knows, because there's nothing here anymore. There is nothing. And I've got to decide real hard here, because I've got the Army of the Cumberland. I can't let that thing out. If I let that out, it takes New Orleans and it cuts my river. I got it pinned right now. Here, well, I can match that, but I got nothing in the East now. Nothing in the Trans-Mississippi either, but like I said, that's tough. You have to concentrate so hard to win that. And that's the end of the line. A little naval operation under McDowell. landed now in Jacksonville. That's going to recuperate. But we're getting closer to taking things away now. The militia have already occurred in Florida before, so they can't happen again. It's so hard to figure out anything to do here. I can't put a force up against Sherman, but I could put forces up against McDowell. I could put a force up against this if it starts to move into the valley. Another thing that can happen is you can bring raider units essentially into play to try to cut supply lines, take cities back, etc. Problem with doing that, one strength point isn't terribly powerful, so some backfield area units can kind of clear that out. Somebody like this can kind of handle that. So it has to be more than that to do any real good. And then once the state's converted, that's gone. You can no longer do it with just a unit. You got to maybe send a leader up there to do it. Probably better to use a cav leader because you can withdraw from combat and stuff and do the kind of historical raider type things. I'm not good at playing that part of the game. I usually don't get to that part because usually this is held and my Confederates usually do well enough that I don't get to the long line, the marching through Georgia type situation. Anyway, we only had one CP use this turn, so that goes up. This chunks forward, and this one is going up.